Today, Great.com talks with Jennifer Frobish, who is Director of Advancement at FRAXA Research Foundation. If you haven't heard of them, they are a non-profit organisation on a mission to find a cure for Fragile X syndrome. If you are new here, please press subscribe on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we learn the importance of finding effective treatments for Fragile X syndrome. Hello, Jennifer, and welcome to our podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, and I really look forward to diving deeper into this conversation about your organisation and learning more about Fragile X syndrome.
Wonderful.
So to
we're
start with,
excited to join you.
Amazing. So to start with then, for me and anybody new here, what is FRAXA Research Foundation and what do you guys do?
Yeah, well, FRAXA Research Foundation is really the leading organization that studies and funds Fragile X syndrome. So for those who don't know what Fragile X syndrome is, Fragile X syndrome is actually the most common cause of inherited intellectual disability and also autism. So it's a genetic disorder, and it can cause any number of things in an affected individual, but it includes intellectual disability, cognitive impairment, speech delays, anxiety, ADHD, seizures sometimes happen, but it can cause a number of things, and it affects both males and females. So FRAXA began in 1994, and it was started by three parents who had sons who were recently diagnosed with the syndrome, and they wanted to make a better future for their children. So here we are almost 30 years later, funding millions of dollars in research and pretty close to finding the effective treatment that we all long for.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing that with us. And for me, and I'm sure a few other listeners, maybe that are not aware of what Fragile X syndrome is. I know you just briefly went over it. So I'd like to ask then, is say every case for every individual different?
It is. So I'm the mother of two children. My son has Fragile X syndrome, full mutation Fragile X. And there are a number of people who live around us who also have children with Fragile X, and each of our children are different. So it is considered somewhat of a spectrum disorder, similar to autism. And so you may have someone who's very high functioning and can carry conversations, have a job, and navigate their life with little to no assistance. Or you may have someone who's like my son, who is considered nonverbal at this point. He has about 200, 300 words that we know, but unless you're with Maddie all the time, you don't necessarily speak Maddie. But he is a little, not significantly affected, but he requires constant assistance to navigate his day. And a lot of the things that his typical peers are doing, Maddie is delayed on. He's more similar to someone who's 3 or 4 years old instead of other teenage boys. So it does vary in affectedness, and females are often less affected than males.
Wow, so that's interesting. So why would you say the reason is for the difference between, say, males and females? Is there a reason because of that?
There is. So Fragile X actually travels on the X chromosome. That's why it's called Fragile X. So there is a particular gene, the FMR1 gene, that is basically shut down. And because it's shut down, the brain doesn't produce a protein that it needs for typical development. In males, they have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, so they only have that one X, whereas females have two X's. So they have the X that has the shutdown gene, and then they have the X that is typical, that is normal. And so they do have some protein that is being created in their bodies, and so they're not as affected because of that.
Very, very interesting. And again, just thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
So I'd like to ask, say, other than the obvious, why would you say that your organization, why would you say that what you do is so important?
Well, when FRAXA was started, there was little to no funding for Fragile X research. There were very few doctors who were really interested in studying it. And we've completely changed that game. So we now fund research and projects. I think we funded research in 19 countries by this point. We have funded almost $32 million in research. And our founders, Katie Clapp and Dr. Mike Trinfalia, have relationships, truly global relationships with doctors across the world. And so they have spent decades fine-tuning the research process, and everything we learn in a study, we build on, we improve it for the next study, and we move forward. And there's nobody else in the world that's focused the way we are, or that's connecting all the dots the way that FRAXA is connecting all of the dots. So what somebody learns in India, we're able to tell a team in, the United States, hey, they learned this. Have you thought about adjusting your compound? Or maybe, we tweak it and we dose it in this way. And so we can coach people to have very effective studies, truly on a shoestring budget. And we're able to do research in areas where perhaps pharma and others aren't yet interested. There are a lot of other, as we'll say, sexier diseases out there that get bigger funding than we do. And so FRAXA is really the organization that's making all of this happen.
And you said there about a lot of the other countries, etc., can communicate with you guys with ease. So would you then say FRAXA is, say, the main sort of central hub for communication with Fragile X syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, for research, for sure. There are other organizations, and you'll see, and in the United States, we have different groups that support individuals, and Australia has its own group. There are a lot of groups that do support for families living with Fragile X. We are the organization that focuses on research. And so if a doctor, a young scientist, a doctoral student, whoever has an interest, we're the group to contact, because we'll be able to connect you with the right individuals on who to conduct your study. And of course, we have great relationships with pharmaceutical companies. So that is our space in the world. We are the Fragile X Research Organization.
That's brilliant to hear. So my next question to you guys would be, sort of since its founding in 1994, what would you say have been some of your greatest challenges, and how have you overcome them?
That's a great question. Funding is always a challenge, because, again, there are a number of rare diseases out there, right? We are one of thousands of rare diseases, and everybody who's impacted by a rare disease wants doctors studying their disease, wants funding for their disease. And so we're all kind of competing for this small pot of funds, right? And so that just continues to be a challenge. Our founder, Katie, will say, if we had millions and millions given to us tomorrow, we could probably find the effective treatment real fast. But we truly are funding things on a shoestring budget. So funding is still our top challenge. I would also say, we're still working to really get people wanting to participate in research. And I can say from personal experience, that was a challenge for me. When my son was young, I resisted medications because he was young and I didn't know what they were going to do to his body, and it made me nervous. And we didn't participate in a clinical trial until he was 11, because it's your baby, right? Like it's your child. And so that can be a scary thing to think about. But I think the more FRAXA does to educate the community on the process and what a clinical trial is actually like, and helping people understand all of the work that has gone into that study before it even hits human subjects, that will help alleviate a lot of concerns. And so our team, including Holly Rose, who is our community services director, Eric Wellen, who is our by title web developer, he does far more than just a website, and our president, Katie Clapp. We are all working exceptionally hard to help the community understand what it's like to participate in a clinical drug trial, and just how beneficial that is to hundreds of thousands of people across the world who are seeking effective treatments for this syndrome.
Yeah, and what I picked up on there, Jennifer, was you said about, say, the families and being, say, a mother yourself, about how, say,
Yeah.
scary it could be when you first found out about your child and they wanted to they give your child the medication, etc.
Mhm.
So my question now to you would be around the families. Like, do you support the families of the individuals living with Fragile X? And if so, like, how do you support those families?
We do. Yeah, we absolutely do. I think one of the fun things about being a Fragile X parent is uh, our community is small and tight knit and close, and we keep up with each other on social media and support each other through social media. But at FRAXA, if someone has questions about medications for their child, we absolutely will help answer those questions. Dr. Mike is fantastic at helping parents make decisions around medications. If a parent is concerned about behaviors and trying to navigate really anything, that's one of Holly's areas of expertise. She is well known among our community, and that's why she's our community services director. She has been at this for 2 decades plus, and has traveled and helped people and is known. I mean, she is known. She's one of the first people I met when my son was diagnosed, and I think we have a great team at FRAXA to help families who are navigating this journey, because it can be very isolating. So we do our best to make it a little less lonely.
Yeah, that's so nice to hear, to just answer any questions, because I can only imagine for any parent with, say, a child suffering or dealing with Fragile X,
Right.
questions that are going through their mind must be sort of overwhelming at some time. So it's just so nice that they've got that support network to sort of fall back on, or to answer any questions that they may have.
Yeah.
So the next question then would be, what are the biggest needs of, say, the individuals that you support, and how are you guys a part of the solution?
I think the biggest need that all of us have right now is really finding effective treatments for our children. Um, they receive, my son, for example, receives a number of therapies, via his school, speech therapies, occupational therapies, ABA, I mean, all kinds of things. That all works well and it helps him learn, but it can only do so much. What we need is an effective treatment or a combination of effective treatments to help our children navigate their day. If we can find a medication or a combination of medications that unlocks that mystery of Fragile X in his brain and allows him to tell me what he needs and what's going on and why he's frustrated, I'm there. I want that. I think we all need that. Because it is hard to watch your child, experience frustration every day because they can't tell you something, or because you're not understanding, or because they really want to be social and play with, their typical peers, but their anxiety just overrides everything and they can't. I think that's the top need in our community right now, is finding that effective treatment for our children.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so hard to hear that when you said that, because as much as, say, for the individual, it's obviously so hard, but for you, say,
Mhm.
as a parent, as a mother, it must be super hard to see your child, and you just wish you could help them, but there's, at the moment,
Mhm.
there's nothing that you can do. So I'm sure that's super hard for you also.
Yeah. It's
So
challenging for all of us, but I think the other thing that you'll hear most Fragile X parents say, is our children are also funny. I mean, my son is hilarious. He's been called the class clown, and I'm like, how's that possible? Like, how is this possible? But they're hilarious and they're loving and they want to be with people and help people. And so, for as frustrating as it is to, see him experience frustration over not being able to communicate effectively, or be limited by his anxiety, it's just as rewarding to see that he is a happy kid. He's happy in general, and quite loving and thriving in his school environment. We know it could be better.
yeah, and again, that's just so so nice to hear, like how happy and excited he is as well at school too. So yeah, that just makes me smile inside too. So I just wanted to ask you then, how many, say, individuals have you supported over the years? Like, if you've got a figure on that at all.
Jeez, I don't know that we have a figure on that. Like I
Wow.
said, we've been at this for almost 30 years. 32 million later, I honestly could not tell you how many people we've helped. I really couldn't.
Okay, so let's we'll go with lots then to start with.
Yeah,
So
yes.
if
A
then
great many, we'll put it that way.
A following question to that then would be, if you have any, like maybe just off the top of your head, is there, say, one major success story that you remember
Yeah.
from being there at all?
We've had a number of them, and in fact, we're coming off of probably our greatest success story now. So we funded a trial with Tetra Therapeutics. They developed a compound, and we were able to help them through phase 1 and phase 2 of that trial. And phase 2 showed incredible promise. We actually completed phase 2 in 2020. So in the midst of the chaos, FRAXA and the doctors that we work with and Tetra, everybody got creative, and we made the trial happen. And what we found is that this compound significantly improves learning in individuals with Fragile X, and it doesn't have the toxicity that we kind of watch for when we look at drug compounds. But the truly amazing part is, once people stopped the drug, the learning continued. So it wasn't like the drug stopped and the progress stopped. It kept going. And we are, I think, very excited to see where that drug trial goes. They're gearing up for phase 3 right now. And so they'll be enrolling patients in clinical sites across the world, actually. I think they're recruiting 200 to 300. Holly might have to jump in and correct me on that one. But we are thrilled to see where that one goes. Very excited to see where that goes.
That sounds super exciting, and it sounds like huge progress as well. So yeah,
huge
fantastic.
Progress.
Fantastic. Yeah. So what would you say your vision is for the future?
For FRAXA, I think our hope is that within the next few years we find effective treatments for those living with Fragile X, and that may come in the form of repurposed existing drugs that help manage the symptoms. It may be Tetra's compound, it may be any number of things. But within the next few years, we'd love to identify effective treatments for those we care about. And then beyond that, we'll from there start tackling the cure. We'll be looking at gene therapies and all the technologies that apply to that, and how can we actually prevent Fragile X for families going forward. I think that's our vision for FRAXA. For me, I just enjoy watching my kids grow up. I hope Maddie finds some effective treatments, and ultimately I just, want him to be happy and know that he's loved and has a community who supports him.
Yeah, that's such a nice vision. It's just so wonderful to hear what the vision is, and yeah, super important as well. So for anybody, say, listening, what can somebody do to help, and what action steps can they take to be a part of the solution?
Yeah, first thing they can do is go to our website. So FRAXA.org, FRAXA.org. There's just a tremendous amount of information on our website about Fragile X, about the work we do. There's, of course, opportunities to donate. If anybody feels inspired to donate, we certainly welcome that. We are exceptionally good stewards of our funds. And so we will put those dollars to good use. But they can also choose to subscribe to our newsletter. That's on our website. And I think that would be a great first step in getting to know Fragile X and getting to know FRAXA, just keeping up to date with us and what we're doing, and watching our progress.
Yeah, that's incredible, Jennifer. And thank you so much for being here. And for
thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you. No, it's been amazing. I've really enjoyed it. So for you listening, if you've enjoyed this episode, please press subscribe on YouTube or on your podcast app, because that will show the algorithms that this is an important conversation, so more people can learn why we need to work together to find a cure for Fragile X syndrome.